The draft agenda of this meeting of the issued as document PC.gal/58/14 of the 7th of April 2014 and is on the table in front of you. Are there any comments on the draft agenda? This does not seem to be the case. Thank you. I would like to inform you that the chairmanship has invited Mrs. Childrix Schapfeld, Head of Office of the Council of Europe Office in Vienna, to attend today's meeting in line with relevant provisions of the OSCE Rules of Procedure. And I would like to announce that we have a visiting group to the Permanent Council this morning, students from the University of Salzburg who are in their 3rd year of law studies. Welcome. I would also highlight at this stage that if the Permanent Council continues to the afternoon, then it will have to take place in the Ratssaal without interpretation, and I think this should be an incentive to respect the time limits in your interventions this morning. The first item on the PC agenda is OSCE engagement with Ukraine. Today, you will have the opportunity to interact with many of the OSCE representatives who are doing their best to provide an adequate OSCE response to the situation in Ukraine. First, with Ambassador Tim Guldimann, the CIO's personal envoy, who has just returned from his 4th visit to the country. Then you will hear the report from Ambassador Adam Kobieracki, acting chief monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine, to be followed by the newly appointed chief monitor, Ambassador Apakan. We will then have the privilege to get updates by 3 heads of OSCE's executive structures. The media arrangements are as follows. Media will be present for the first 3 presentations, then I will kindly ask them to leave the room for the presentations of the head of institutions. Now I would like to give the floor first to Ambassador Guldimann. Tim, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. This was my 4th visit to Ukraine, and we went to Lviv, Odessa and Kherson, expressing by going to the west and south of the country that the scope of the OSCE to Ukraine is the whole of the country. We met the governors, speakers of regional parliaments as well as the mayors, also representatives of the civil society, and above all, we got in contact with the newly established offices of our special monitoring mission. We paid a short visit to the European Border Assistance Mission in Odessa, working on the borders of Transnistria, just to get aware of the fact that nearby there is the issue of Transnistria. Speaking with these representatives, we got the impression that the situation is generally quiet, that the authorities are preparing the presidential elections of 25th of May. There is no doubt about these elections, and also to see that there is a large part of the population Russian-speaking in this area, that the use of language is not a political issue. People say they either speak Russian or Ukrainian, and no political positions are linked to the fact that they use one or the other language. There were some concerns expressed with regard to the question of decentralization, with 2 aspects. One concerns the rules of the organization of the state, and there are also efforts announced by the authorities in this respect that reforms should take place. And there is another aspect which we have been told that this concerns also the the way state money is collected in Kiev and redistributed to the regions. The problems indicated were that this money does not arrive in time, in contradiction to established rules. That just sheds a light to the question of decentralization also with respect to the money flows within the state. An aspect which we also saw in the east of the country concerns the monopoly, the state monopoly of the use of force. I mean, the fact that there are also in that region armed people outside of state institutions, even representatives of the civil society movement, and who told us they do not have confidence in police, therefore they are thinking of a self-defense efforts. And I asked them, fully legally, or how do you proceed? And they said, yes, of course, fully legally, but this gives also an indication of the question which I consider for the whole of the country, that the state monopoly of the use of force and the role of the militia, of the role of police is crucial for the, let's say, law enforcement institutions of the state, which in certain areas do not have the respect of the population which is necessary for the internal stability. That is all over the country. One point was taken up by the authorities in the oblast of Kherson concerning the border to Crimea. This poses or gives them the new problem how to organize a border where on the other side it is, let's say, institutions are established as if it were an international border, and they have to establish their administrative measures with regard to commerce or normal transition of people. This border also concerns the question of how people in Crimea will be able to participate in presidential elections. And they are wondering to what extent they could give them the possibility to come over to the oblast of Kherson, and whether these arrangements then fulfill the legal requirements for the elections. And we will give this issue further as an issue to ODIHR when it comes to the preparation of the observation of the elections. The last point, it was interesting that in the foreign ministry in Kiev, where I reported back about our trip, that it was stressed how important the presence of international observers in the East is with respect to events which we have heard over the last few days, so that also for the government in Kiev, stressing the importance of objective assessment of what is happening there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Guldimann. I would now like to ask our second speaker to provide us with the second weekly report in his capacity as acting head of the Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to speak to the Permanent Council in my capacity as outgoing acting chief monitor for the Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. My second detailed weekly report was circulated to all delegations yesterday, so I'll keep my remarks brief this morning. Let me start with operational update. The number of staff in the mission structure has grown to 121. This includes 85 trained monitors and 15 newly arrived secondees who have started their two-day training in Kiev this morning. So before I pass the baton to the newly appointed chief monitor, the target of the initial 100 civilian monitors, representing in total 40 participating states, has been reached. Even if, just for the sake of clarity, 20 of those who are first responders currently on loan from various OSCE executive structures will be replaced only next week. I have been asked repeatedly over the last few days if and when the number of monitors will be increased. I've shared my recommendations with the Chair and the Chief Monitor. I would recommend increasing the strength of the mission by another 100 monitors. although it is the prerogative of the Chief Monitor, I'd still like to offer two observations at this stage. First of all, the mission needs to be consolidated and fully functional before entering an expansion phase. Secondly, we will need assurances from you that you are ready to continue to contribute financially to the mission in the same spirit of strong political support and generosity. While, of course, I'm not questioning the validity of such assurances, let me also be clear. We spent real money for the SMM based on official pledges and new entries in our bank accounts. For the record, we have not yet secured enough funding for the first 100 monitors, so before we embark on the recruitment of an additional 100, we would like to see the funding gap closed. One word of reporting, on reporting. I discussed the issue of reporting with the Chair, the Chief Monitor, and the SMM acting leadership. For the time being, the mission will continue preparing daily reports to be circulated to all participating states, but this, of course, may change depending on the circumstances. Spot reports will be issued if deemed necessary and if warranted by the situation on the ground. Monitoring and reporting, increasing visibility, complemented by dialogue facilitation whenever plausible and possible, will, I think, remain the main focus of the mission in line with its mandate. Situation on the ground. I'm not going into the details of that in different regions, as you have a detailed summary provided in my weekly report, but want just to flag a few general points. Last week, I traveled to Kiev and Kharkiv. Whilst the situation was generally calm there last week, several significant incidents took place in Kharkiv as well as in Donetsk and Luhansk over the weekend. Several relatively small-scale and initially peaceful rallies resulted in several regional administration buildings being seized by protesters. Although anti-riot police were present, they refrained from confrontations with the protesters. My visit to Kiev and Kharkiv also revealed that there is a bit of confusion and misperceptions about various international presences on the ground, including those from the OSCE. Project Coordinator Ukraine, National Dialogue Project, Special Monitoring Mission, Audio Selection Observation Mission, and experts deployed under the Vienna document. I've discussed this with our press colleagues, and we are trying to do our best to explain our different mandates and roles, but I recognize this issue cannot be addressed overnight. Final points in my capacity as the CPC Director. Whilst I do appreciate your generous contributions, both human and financial, to our efforts in Ukraine, I would not like to see them jeopardize our operations elsewhere. I've been alerted by several heads of mission who flagged that because of your decision to prioritize contributions to Ukraine, they can no longer secure funding for their activities or receive secondments for their operations in Southeastern Europe and Central Asia. I hope that we can count on your continued support to all our field operations. Last but not least, I would like to thank our colleagues in DHR and DMF for their excellent cooperation, and my special thanks go to the entire CPC team, my two deputies there, Raza Ostrowskaite and Klaus Neukiewicz, as well as to John Crosby, acting head of operations, whose presence in Ukraine was essential in making this rapid deployment possible. Personal final comment. I've been honored to serve and act as Chief Monitor. I'm happy to pass this honor to Ambassador Ertugrul Apakan, while confirming continued full support for him and his team on behalf of the CPC and the entire Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would like here to thank you, Adam, for your strong and skillful engagement, your leadership in launching this extremely important OSCE endeavor. Your temporary assignment is now coming to an end. As you know, the CIO appointed on the 2nd of April 2014 the Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine, Ambassador Apakan of Turkey, together with his two deputies, Mr. Mark Etherington of the United Kingdom and Mr. Alexander Hug of Switzerland. I would now like to give the floor to Ambassador Apakan.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairperson. It's a great pleasure to be here today with you and together with this august body. Excellencies, I extend my personal greetings to each and every one of you. I would at the outset to express my gratitude for the confidence and trust that has been vested in me. I am cognizant how careful you proceed as a deliberative body. The OSCE's consensus rule empowers the organization in a special manner. I would like to assure you that I will also draw force from this important fact while discharging my mandate. I am also well aware of the delicacy and sensitiveness of the mission and of the magnitude of your expectations. The OSCE was very much conceived to address questions like the one we have been witnessing in Ukraine over the recent past. The OSCE has developed a specialized toolbox reinforced with political backing based on the unanimous will of all participating states. No other international organization enjoys such amenities. It befalls us to make best use of the equipment within this toolbox and other opportunities that the OSCE provides us with a platform for dialogue and engagement to begin with. After an intensive period of deliberation, the Permanent Council adopted its decision number 1117 on the deployment of a special monitoring mission to Ukraine. Almost immediately thereafter, the mission's initial units began deployment on the ground. At this moment, the mission has begun operating in all the locations specified in PC Decision 1117. I think this is an important achievement demonstrating the OSCE's ability as an organization to quickly adapt and react to developments on the ground. I wish to commend Secretary General Zanier for having overseen this operation. I should also laud my predecessor, Ambassador Kobieracki, for his outstanding performance as acting chief monitor. We will, of course, benefit greatly from the findings of other visits performed earlier in Ukraine by OSCE entities, including the Human Rights Assessment Mission that I understand is expected to release its final report later this month. Mr. Chairperson, I shall be proceeding to Kiev to assume my duties as Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine on Monday. With the active contribution of all the valuable members of the mission, we will collectively carry out the mandate the Permanent Council has conferred upon us through its decision 1117. We will gather, in the manner described in this decision, all the information and data that we are required to collect and report thereon to the Council through the chairmanship. The objective information that we will be imparting shall constitute a sound and reliable foundation for the Permanent Council and other pertinent OSCE bodies to base their deliberations. As a source, thereby, of credible data, I should also hope to see the mission contribute to diffusing tensions on the ground and at other levels where stakeholders interact. I am sure you will understand my disposition not to make any statements with regard to the situation in Ukraine without having yet been there in my present capacity. Once in Ukraine, I intend to undertake a two-pronged approach. I will first aim to see that all the tasks the mission is entrusted with are carried out, and so in the manner they are expected to be carried out. Second, I shall begin a process of overseeing, analyzing, and comparing how our infrastructure and capacities fare vis-à-vis our output. This will help me establish how to make better use of our assets, if possible, as well as to determine those areas where additional resources may be necessitated to realize Permanent Council's expectations. Mr. Chairperson, as I am coming to the conclusion of my remarks, I would like to emphasize the following. The Special Monitoring Mission is indeed of your making and of your fashioning. Every single member of the mission will fulfill their share in this endeavor in a manner fully in line with the parameters you have established. We will regularly report to you, and we will welcome your feedback, which we will also perceive and cherish as a token of your sustained engagement with us and with the issues we face. I, my distinguished deputies from the United Kingdom and Switzerland, the team leaders, and all other valuable members of the mission will be counting and depending on your continued support and wise guidance while proceeding ahead with the important and arduous task ahead of us. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Ambassador, and let me assure you that you can count on our support, and we wish you full success in your endeavors. Now I would like to kindly ask that we take a short pause to allow the media to leave.